Early in the 70s, I wrote a song for Jim Stafford called Spiders and Snakes.
With substance use, bad management, and changing tastes in music to a whole new chapter in their career. Join us as we uncover the untold story of these country music legends, the Bellamy Brothers. The Bellamy Brothers, David and Howard Bellamy, were an American pop and country music duo. David Milton Bellamy was born on the 16th of September 1950, while his brother Homer Howard Bellamy was born on the 2nd of February 1946. The brothers have their roots in Dade City, Florida. As young, talented artists, David and Howard Bellamy were inspired by many musical sources right from an early age. While growing up, they saw their father play country music around the house and was also a member of a local Western swing band. Aside from that, they were equally inspired by the rock and roll music their sister played at that time. Unlike other young artists of their time, David and Howard never had any formal music training. Somehow, the brothers were able to learn how to play lots of musical instruments like guitar, mandolin, organ, and piano, among others. It was quite evident that they had sound musical knowledge and talent, all of which contributed to their massive success in the 1970s and 1980s. Their success story started with the release of their crossover hit, Let Your Love Flow, in 1976, which became a #1 hit single on the Billboard Hot 100.
Playing in church and a family reunion with our father years ago, and then...
Before that time, they were able to secure their very first musical gig in 1968 at a benefit concert with their father in San Antonio, Florida, at the Rattlesnake Roundup. They equally played with their father in church at that time. By the break of the late 60s, the brothers and their band played for dances at the Dade City Civic Center and at Louie's in Brooksville. Aside from that, they also played as the Accidents and later as the Heterogeneous Grouping, performing covers of many of the popular tunes of the time like A Whiter Shade of Pale, My Girl, and Little Bit of Soul. However, their very first paid gigs took place while they were playing fraternity parties at the University of Florida. It wasn't long after that, the brothers then decided to move to Atlanta and formed a band called Jericho. During this period, they played often at local clubs. However, playing in bands and clubs at that time proved extremely stressful for the brothers, and all of a sudden, they decided to move back home. It wasn't long before they were soon noticed by a friend of recording artist Jim Stafford, who eventually recorded Spiders and Snakes, and it ended up becoming a top 5 hit. Through this hit, they were able to gather enough money to move to Los Angeles. Still, within that period, Howard became a road manager for Stafford.
To this day, same ranch, and it's been in our family since the Civil War.
Wow.
Same ranch. And
before they were able to hit #1 on the pop singles chart in 1976 with Let Your Love Flow, and were able to later make 10 #1 country hits among 25 top 10, David and Howard Bellamy were more like poverty ranchers and farmers. Their father supported his family as a hired hand. He was seen always punching cows for many of his neighbors. While in high school, David's band, The Accidents, played locally and was paid in return, but in the form of gas, beers, a couple of bucks, and girls. He mentioned once that he never really thought much about going into any other profession as a person, other than that of a musician, because to him, that's all he knew how to do. Unlike David, Howard was quite different, even though, like David, he had been taught about guitar chords by their father, who played as a country musician at local parties and roadhouses. While David was playing the kinds of joints known around the country as skull orchards, Howard, on the other hand, decided to take on a full-time job with a meatpacking plant as a cattle buyer. By the time he was 19, he already owned a company car, an expense account, and a decent salary for a kid his age, but somehow he didn't join the band. At that time, it can be said that survival was of high importance to them. However, David followed his dreams while Howard followed his common sense. For Howard, music was equally important to him as it was important to David, but somehow he just knew that he had to make a living. David was always pointing in the direction of music, but he never really made any money out of it until his time came. By then, Howard, I've always had an income. Colorfully enough, it was a chicken snake that did the most to start Howard and David on the road to commercial music success. One evening, after a few drinks and an unrehearsed jam, Howard and David headed back to their place, and David climbed into his bed to get some sleep while Howard chose a sleeping bag. Immediately, Howard crawled into the sleeping bag. He came out of it like a lightning bolt, screaming at the top of his lungs. By the time David jumped up to see what was going on, he caught sight of a huge chicken snake coming out of the bag with Howard. The incident was both scary and funny at the same time. But it was unknown to the brothers how that particular incident would become extremely important to their careers. A few days later, David drove down to Tampa to check out a new recording studio he heard about. After he scored a job helping around the studio, he played the owner, Blair Mooney, some songs he'd written. When Mooney started a label he called Moon Records. The first release on the label was David singing a song he wrote called Rainy Day in the South, which came and went without much to show for. It wasn't long after that Phil Gernhardt came into their lives. Gernhardt at that time had produced the hit song titled Stay and a list of other hits for an Ocala band called the Royal Guardsmen. Their first hit was titled Snoopy vs. the Red Baron, which was highly successful and was able to sell up to 1 million singles. Gernhardt had some good news for the brothers. Jim Stafford, another of Gernhardt's artists, had been visiting the office when he spotted a tape box on his desk. The title read Spiders and Snakes, and somehow he liked the title, the story, and the song, and he wanted to rewrite it with the song's writer. Well, fortunately, the writer was David Bellamy, and that particular song he wrote was inspired by Howard's adventure with the chicken snake back at their place on the farm. It wasn't long after the meeting, and soon Spiders and Snakes would be climbing the charts. As time went by, Gernhardt, on the other hand, was moving out to LA. He wanted David to move there too, so he could write songs with Stafford. At the same time, David was offered a publishing contract, an artist recording contract, and a management contract. This was more like he was transferring pieces of himself to a particular guy who didn't know him personally. This was a big decision to make at this time. Well, somehow David had an idea of what to do, so he decided to drive straight home to Darby, to the people he trusted with his life. His father, Homer, his mother, Frances, and his brother, Howard. By the time he got home, they listened to what he had to say and were extremely happy for him and the future of his music career. But obviously they were all just country people and not lawyers. So it was more like they could only show their support, happiness, and faith in him, but were unable to contribute on how he would be able to secure the contract or whatever benefits that would come from it. While still pondering over everything and the offer in front of him, he weighed his options, rolled his dice, signed the papers with no legal counsel and no changes, and a few days later he returned them to Gernhardt. Well, at this time, David and Howard began their fantasy as real-life cowboys caught in a merry land. They started staying in an old mansion near the Hollywood Bowl, sharing space with a memorable magician who was equally an entertainer named Gallagher. Aside from that, he was one of the people who wrote skits for Stafford's hit TV show. Due to the nature of Howard's job as a personal assistant to Stafford, he had to spend much of his time on the road with the entertainer. Meanwhile, David, on the other hand, was writing songs with Stafford and others, and would practice them with Howard in a little studio they had created up in their basement.
A guy named Larry Williams wrote that song. He was Neil Diamond's roadie.
As time went on, Gernhardt liked what he heard and gave David the consent to cut some songs with Neil Diamond's band. During one of those sessions, Diamond's drummer, Dennis St. John, walked over to David and informed him that their roadie, Larry Williams, wrote a particular song, and he would like David to listen to it, so maybe it would sound like something they would love to jump on. Immediately, after David listened to the song, he was hooked onto the song. The song was titled, Let Your Love Flow. Well, just around that time, a company of national record promoters called the Scotti Brothers was making so much money both for David and themselves by promoting Spiders and Snakes around the country. As time went on, something significant took place. This time, Howard was at Cypress Gardens, setting up a show for Jim, and while trying to set the sound, he sang a particular song unknown to him, and Tony was impressed. Immediately, Tony decided to tell Gernhardt about Howard's great voice, and Gernhardt asked David if he and Howard had ever thought of singing together as a duo.
We had a group name. We had a couple of those. We had a band called Jericho. And
at the sound of this, David laughed and explained that they'd been the Bellamy Brothers since they first played music with their dad at the Rattlesnake Roundup in Darby. All of a sudden, Tony interrupted and asked him why haven't they decided to just call themselves the Bellamy Brothers. Fortunately, this is where the name Bellamy Brothers remained permanent. When the label chiefs at Curb Records decided that the song titled Let Your Love Flow would be released in Europe before a US release, the Bellamy Brothers were in shock to witness firsthand how the whole planning involved in the music business took place. All of a sudden, like wildfire, the record hit the charts in the Netherlands alongside the video, which was able to receive airplay on TV shows in England and Europe. While this wave of success was spreading, the Bellamy Brothers quickly decided to embark on a promotional tour in Europe. They experienced a different life that was far from what they had ever seen on the farm and were treated like royalty all through the tour. Well, these were the same persons who weeks before didn't matter to anybody outside of just their family members. But somehow, they have found their way into the ears and hearts of millions of Europeans. While this success was counting, Let Your Love Flow was gradually breaking through in America, destined to become the largest BMI airplay record of that particular year. At this point, the brothers became so busy, with no time to think, too busy putting together a band, and they also had to get back to LA. Their success story at this point was more like a surprise to even themselves. It was more like two farm boys from Florida with a worldwide hit. They were so big that it all felt like their career path had been stabilized. But a hit is a hit, especially for the Bellamy Brothers since it's their first, and especially when it's an international hit. Well, many will refer to this hit as a monster. As with most monsters, the monster of their sudden fame had sharp teeth. Let's get into the details of all that is to unfold.
Nowhere even close to being a mega hit. That was one of the problems, is that song was so big, it was...
The monsters of their fame. By the time they returned to LA, they lost themselves to lots of partying, and all the while their hit track, Let Your Love Flow, was still climbing the charts. During the mid-70s in LA, it was more like there was a wave in every rehearsal hall as substances were scattered everywhere. And to them at that time, there was no way they would escape from not being a part of it. So somehow, they were in with the wave of substance use. Welcome to the crazy world of the Bellamy Brothers. Fortunately, one thing stood firm for them at that time. They never went off track. They were still working on their music, determined that they would be able to build a real career out of the success of the song Let Your Love Flow. At this point, they decided to put together a good touring band and went out on the road. At this time, they were scheduled to open for one of the nation's hottest acts, Loggins and Messina, but they were not happy working with Gernhardt since it was more like he had made lots of money off their success. At that time, Gernhardt bought a new beach house in Malibu, while the Bellamy Brothers, who owned one of the biggest hits of the year, remained poor. That wasn't all. In a particular instance, $60,000 worth of their music equipment was stolen from their tour truck in Chicago, driving them deeper into financial trouble. When it got to some point, the brothers decided to give up their band and left LA, returning to the home comforts of Darby. Upon getting back home, they thought of doing more work on their country stuff, and since Darby is pretty close to Nashville, they considered staying in Florida. At least the rent there was low as compared to Los Angeles. Aside from that, as farm boys, at least they also had cows they could butcher and fruits to eat. As time went by, a few of the big shots in LA found out that the brothers were planning to stay in Darby. They told them that if they decided to stick to that decision, they would never work in showbiz again. In fact, at some point, they had to call for a meeting with Mike Curb and told him how hard it was to work with Gernhardt and begged for a better working situation, especially with someone whom they would not have to struggle with. Somehow, they were so used to the troubles they had faced with Gernhardt that they thought that they would have to battle with Curb. But Curb's cousin John, who was a record promoter, liked them and mentioned that he had heard a couple of things about their material, and he thinks he would be able to get them played on country radio. Wondering what this would feel like for the brothers, more like where has this angel Curb been all the while? Well, this was a whole new phase for them. Their first country chart record, titled Slippin' Away, made it into the 30s. By their next single, Lovin' On, the track also climbed to number 16. They were on the road with Conway Twitty at the time, and when they started playing one of their songs called If I Said You Have a Beautiful Body, Would You Hold It Against Me? The crowd reaction was so strong. For the brothers, they started to believe that this was more like a second chance, and another of those hit songs like Let Your Love Flow, the kind of song that lights up a career and keeps it burning. Well, another banger was on the way. Almost nobody at Curb Records believed in the song Beautiful Body, and the brothers had to battle to get even a small recording budget.
And we had a couple of those. We had a band called Jericho, and
that was how things were for the brothers back then. They had to convince them to let them record it. Everything was a battle at this point. They were reaching rock bottom when they moved back to the farm. They did know how to put a band together. David had written another hit. Well, fortunately, Beautiful Body became another monster hit on the US country charts and charted worldwide. The Bellamy Brothers became one of country music's most popular acts. With a string of hit records and a packed schedule of top-dollar live dates, they built a worldwide loyal following that still fills clubs and theaters. Somehow, the story of what happened to the Bellamy Brothers is more like it never occurred to them to be stopped. They may have learned the hard parts of business in LA and Europe, but somehow they had to go home to the farm because to them that's where they were able to find their music. The Bellamy Brothers enjoyed great success in the 1970s and 80s with hits like Let Your Love Flow and If I Said You Have a Beautiful Body. However, their fame declined in the following decades. Various factors contributed to their decline, including challenges with their management, substance use during the height of their career, and financial difficulties, all of which they had to go through. Despite these struggles, the brothers were able to reinvent themselves by focusing on country music and achieving success in Europe. Today, they remain active in the industry at a lower pace, as compared to all that they were able to achieve back then, continuing to tour and release new music. As a duo, both David and Howard have light voices, but they harmonize well, and the simple guitar and keyboard playing along became the ideal expression for some of their strong material. They have since come up with even more compelling songs and have achieved so much from their tracks and albums. Let's get into the details. Albums, legacy, and achievements. The brothers have been able to record over 200 concert dates worldwide each year, cutting across the United States, Europe, Australia, and South Africa, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and India, among others. By the break of 1999, the Bellamy Brothers played for American troops stationed in Bosnia, and on Easter Sunday in 2000, they gave a concert for American troops in Kosovo. It was the first time that the base had allowed a band to play. That wasn't all. By 2014, they toured India and Sri Lanka and made history as the first country music act to tour in those Asian countries. In the same year, they also participated in Blake Shelton's Friends and Heroes tour. By 2011, the brothers supported earthquake victims in New Zealand when they joined the New Zealand Red Cross and Judy Seal International to raise support through live auctions. Fast forward to 2016, they decided to partner with the Susan G. Komen Foundation to release a video for Let Your Love Flow, after which they also supported the foundation's breast cancer research by donating $1 for every digital download of their 40-year package. One time, the Bellamy Brothers released an album of gospel music, titled Jesus Is Coming, on the 8th of May 2007. That particular album received 2 Dove Award nominations. That wasn't all. They went ahead and released a second gospel album, Pray For Me, in 2012. By the break of 2008, the song Let Your Love Flow was used in the Barclaycard advert for their new contactless cards. By the next year, the song got into the UK singles chart again, making it to number 48 based on downloads, and also peaked at number 21 in the pop charts, alongside being listed on BMI's list of Top 100 Song of the Century at number 68 that same year. A cover by Petra Haden was used in 2010 Toyota Prius commercials. Well, at some point, their June 2010 song Jalapenos, which was about politics, was banned before it could even be released to the radio. Well, fortunately, the video became a major YouTube hit with millions of views. In the same year, they recorded the greatest hits sessions with Swiss rock star Gola, and the project sold double platinum in Europe and was at number 1 of the Swiss Schweizer hit parade for 7 weeks. By 2012, they collaborated with Austrian Schlager singer DJ Ötzi to create the album Simply the Best, which was DJ Ötzi's first full English-language album, and the album was able to successfully enter the German album charts at number 3. By 2014, they teamed up again with Gola and recorded Mermaid Cowgirl in Switzerland, which was able to achieve gold record status in Switzerland with the album. By the break of June 2014, Rolling Stone magazine ranked the song Old Hippie as number 95 in their list of the 100 greatest country songs. During these years, the brothers also worked on many other projects that were more of a collaboration with the likes of Truck Stop, Alan Jackson, and Tom Astor. Their memoir, Let Your Love Flow, The Life and Times of the Bellamy Brothers, was released in April 2018. The following year, they released their album Over the Moon, which consisted of 14 of their original songs, which were written and recorded at the Bellamy's studio on their Derby Ranch. In that same year, the brothers became the feature of the reality television series Honky Tonk Ranch, which aired on the Cowboy Channel and now on the Circle Network, featuring the brothers, their friends, and family. To date, they have released more than 50 albums, primarily on Curb Records. In the late 1990s, David's sons Noah and Jesse became active in the music industry, and later on they too started performing as the duo Jesse and Noah.
Same ranch, and it's been in our family since the Civil War.
Wow.
Same ranch, and we were raised there, families before us raised there, and we just...
The Bellamy Brothers became one of the most successful and celebrated brother duos in country music, with millions of records sold and decades of sold-out gigs on the road. They currently live in Darby, Florida, on a 200-acre ranch, where they raise cattle and horses, with 3 generations of their family living together. Aside from that, the ranch is also the location of the recording studio where much of their work is recorded. The farm is much more than a place to raise cows for the Bellamy Brothers. They developed a powerful business arm where they created a popular TV show and established a thriving book publishing company, as well as a record company that releases a steady stream of albums. Howard Bellamy is a former cattle buyer. Howard loves the rugged cowboy life. As a person, he lived with a deep appreciation of the land, and his cattle is his preference, but touring and jet-setting in over 70 countries has also given him an appreciation for many things. Unfortunately, he got divorced after 25 years of marriage. While his brother David Bellamy, on the other hand, got stuck to his music as a singer, songwriter, and business head of the company. He oversees touring, recording, distribution of music, and almost anything else related to the name, the Bellamy Brothers. He's the father of 5 sons and has a deep sense of family and tradition, alongside his love for treasures like old Native American artifacts and autographs from Gene Autry and Dawes Butler. He's mostly referred to as a collector of almost everything. According to him, it's not hoarding if it's cool stuff. The story of whatever happened to the Bellamy Brothers is one of triumph and tragedy, success and setbacks, though their time in the spotlight may have declined so much compared to their early days.